So I've finished 4 forms today. These forms are all ready for Tuesday's class to attach a handle. And this is my slab mug. I've got my bottom on it, nice flat bottom, although it did kind of indent a little bit because my bottom, I attached it when maybe the clay was too thin or I got it a little too wet. So as it gets leather hard, which is probably later down the line, I'm gonna stick this spatula in there and push it. I'm not gonna do that now because it's gonna make a dent in my form because the clay is too plastic. So I actually just made a little mark that I'm not happy with. I'm gonna smooth that out with my paintbrush. And then this one was a little bit thicker. You can see the lip. I need to thin that one out. It was also a little bit shorter, just based on the slab that I cut. But both have bottoms. I'm more happy with this bottom and more happy with this thickness. So you get variations as you go, especially when you're building something that's one of a kind. This pinch pot I smoothed and refined today. I shaved off material here to make it less bottom heavy. It's ready for a handle, which will go perfectly right there. Now, I had a student say today, Miss I, my pinch pot looks more like a bowl. I have a feeling that this is more of a bowl or a planter than a cup, but it could be a shallow espresso cup and I can still fit a handle. So as long as you can fit a handle on there and there's room in between for your fingers to go, you're in good shape. The other thing that you could do, well, you could start over and you could use this as a different form. You could roll coils. Of course, you would want the coil to be consistent thickness and also stretch all the way around. And you could slip and score some coils on the form to heighten it. You could leave the coils with bumps and ridges, or you could smooth them into the form after you slipped and scored to raise the height. So that gave me about 1/2 inch. And you do get some bumps and you end up spending a lot of time patching. So for a beginner, it could be a waste of time. Might be better to start over. But just giving you some options. I have a lot of students asking about making extra projects, and I am going to give extra credit, which will be some incentive to raise the grade right before the end of Q3 grade reports. This project is going to close us out. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is grab this last pinch pot. And most of us are doing the pinch method. It's wonky, it's not quite round, it has a bunch of fingerprints on it and pinch marks. It's small still. It's probably the smallest of the 3. So for those of you doing the slab method, I'm going to come back to you in a moment. I actually put a paper towel on my slab because it dried out a little bit, and I wrapped it around lunchtime and it's already getting softer. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with this form. And I want to first thin it out. I also feel like I could maybe get some height if I whack it with this tool, and I'm hitting it right here. So I'm going to put all 4 fingers inside, thumb on the outside, and I'm literally whacking this spatula that I got from my kitchen into the form right here at an angle. So that'll help me raise the height, thin out the thick area before removing more clay, and create more shape. And then I can flatten the bottom. And because I made this yesterday, it's a lot easier for me to whack it without it shifting too much as far as moving around and being able to manipulate it more easily. The next thing I'm going to do is put both hands inside, thumbs down here, all 4 fingers from each hand on the outside, and I'm going to work from the very bottom all the way up to the top and do a full rotation, and I'm trying to just feel for thick areas and inconsistencies, skipping over the thinner areas to try to raise the height and even out the walls a slight bit more before I start shaving off clay. And also patching indents and smoothing and refining. I just got probably an inch in height by doing that. And this is looking more like a mug and less like a pot. Maybe a third of an inch, or excuse me, 2/3 of an inch. Okay, so I'm gonna flip this over. And if you have this tool, I know not everybody has it, just based on the supply that they had at Phoenix, you can use this tool and start removing clay. So she had the Sureform. We don't have the Sureform, but I can start scraping away clay, and I feel that it's bottom heavy. It's thick, and I'm doing this slowly because if I take off a huge chunk, it's kind of hard to make it even. So a little bit at a time. And I'm just dragging that tool on its side. Let me zoom in a little bit more on that. I'm getting a lot of burrs and boogers, which I'll go back and smooth later. I'm not so worried about that right now. Now, not everybody has that big loop tool, but most of us do have this guy. And you can do that same technique, but with more strokes. And you're just gonna have to make sure you're doing it evenly. What I like to do is keep my slip bucket nearby and use all these scraps so they don't make a mess of my area and put them into my bucket. Because what's gonna happen is they're gonna find their way back on to the form and create more of a mess to clean up later. And everything that I'm doing tool-wise is at an angle. It's not directly puncturing the form itself. Now I'm going to do a little bit of smoothing with my rib tool, but first I want to clean my work board, make sure there's not little scraps of clay that are going to interfere with smoothing. So I got my rib tool here. You can see that it's starting to bend into a curve shape because I often hold it like that. Makes sense when I'm working on a curve form to curve the tool. That's why it's made to be flexible. I'm going to try to redistribute some of those scraps that I acquired from removing clay and shift them around, and also take what's on the tool and remove that, cleaning the tool often so I'm not just redistributing the dry pieces. And then I'm going to take this tool and I'm going to hold my form steady and I'm going to pull from the bottom up. When you use the metal rib and you go top to bottom, side to side, horizontally, you get a lot better results. All right, that's feeling a lot less heavy, but I still have some more to go. It's feeling thicker here. It's feeling a lot better. Okay, time to do one more last pinch check before patching the Band-Aids, and then I'm going to go on to my slab while those of you are applying what you saw in the pinch method or continuing to plan your sketch and trying to get that sketch done ASAP. lightly damp sponge over the lip, not too much water. Remember, we want to avoid a lot of water, especially down on the bottom. Okay, I'm going to support the form with my outside hand and with my inside hand. I'm going to start using that lightly damp sponge to smooth, and I'm going to rotate. Trying not to stretch out the form. That's why I'm using my outside hand to stabilize. And I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing. And then I'm going to take this guy and remove a little more clay, but this time with my straight side, not my curved side. Getting more thickness off. All right, so overall, looking a lot thinner, a lot more refined, and now I'm looking for little tool marks and divots and nail marks. And I'm going to start patching those while the clay is still plastic, because as she mentioned in the video, you want to get the shape that you're looking for before it gets leather hard. It's hard to manipulate the shape if the clay is holding its shape already. So I'm going to take some of the scraps of clay that I remove with my rib tool. And the only reason I can do this without slipping and scoring is because the clay is plastic. If the clay was leather hard, I wouldn't be able to do this. And I'm still dipping my little scraps in water. So I just pinch this little scrap out flat. And I'm looking for that divot that I first saw. And I'm going to lay that scrap of clay in there. And I'm going to wiggle it both ways. Smooth. Try to make that more of a planed surface, which means flat. And then I saw another big guy inside, right here, big divot. And I'm going to do that same tactic with another piece of clay, pinching it flat, dipping it in the water, and then putting it right in there, gently massaging mostly the outside. Now the pot's a bit floppy, and I've been working on it for probably like less than 10 minutes now. I'm going to give it a 5-minute flash in the sun while I roll this slab for the bottom of my mug. And I'm going to come back to it. So I'm going to put it out there. And then I'm going to clean this station up because I know myself, I'm a little clumsy and I can get kind of messy when I work. And I'm going to clean my board before I roll a slab out for the slab method. All right, so I have this from yesterday. I didn't slip and score. I'm going to slightly open it. Take the soda can out. It's still somewhat malleable. I'm going to look inside, see if there's any tool marks without letting it become fully open. And I'm going to get some more clay and roll out a slab through the bottom. This is probably plenty of clay. First, flattening it with the palm of my hand. Rolling it. Also trying to keep within the same thickness. So I flip it over, go the other direction with Great Grandma's creaky rolling pin. That's feeling good. Smoothing. Looking for air bubbles. And I did wedge this before class. I see one air bubble. Okay, moving that out of the way. And now I need to slip and score this form. Now, I did line it up pretty good yesterday, but I noticed that the cut was a bit off. So with a knife from the kitchen, now that it's firmed up a bit, I'm going to hold right here, and then I'm going to cut it at a diagonal. Going super slow and pulling up on this part right here. And then that same diagonal, I'm going to cut right here. Aligning those two up. You might have to cut it a couple times. I feel like it's a little off. That's it. Okay, now I need to slip and score, keeping in mind that my other vessel is outside. I'm going to score the outside edge of both sides. Trying not to open it too much. I don't want to crack it, especially if it's getting leather hard. All right, boom. Now I need slip. And I've been adding little scraps of clay today to my bucket, so I'm going to try to avoid those pieces that aren't soft yet and get some of the goopy stuff. I'm going to use a paintbrush to apply it because I don't want it dripping inside. I'm going to be really precise on the application. And then with my fingers, I'm going to try to line those up. And then if you are doing the slab method and you're kind of glancing over and working with me, take a look at this. Make sure your tool is clean. So I'm going to take that off. I'm going to put my hand inside. And I'm going to just go like that. Absorb that extra slip immediately. And now I'm going to go like I'm making little X's. And there goes my line. Bye-bye. Now what about the inside? I've got a ton of slip in there. I also don't want to just keep putting tools and tools and tools and then getting it to be a weak spot. So I'm going to take this end of my wooden knife. I just cleaned it. And I'm going to, so you can see that a little bit better, run that tool right up through. I'm going to do that a second time. Then I'm going to take my sponge, stuff it in there, get the end of my spatula and push that sponge down through. I'm going to do that one more time. And then the last thing I'm going to do is take a little bit more slip and paint it in with my paintbrush. And one more time with the knife. And lastly, again with the sponge. So I do have a little bit of a gap here where I connected the top. This would be a good time to put the Band-Aid right away. I'm going to roll a baby coil, break it in half. I'm going to dip this one in slit, and I'm going to put it right in there and level that out. I'm going to look at both sides and see which side has the more even walls, and I think it's this side. So from the top, I'll make sure this is more cylindrical, more round. And do the same thing with the bottom. Bring that more into a circle shape. Line it up here with my slab bottom. So I just put those two on top of each other. And before I cut, I'm going to measure with, you could even use a pen for this. You could use your scoring tool. And then I'm going to take that off. I'm going to score right away. Now this form is a little harder, right? Because I made it yesterday, so I got to score a little deeper and add a little more pressure when I'm trying to dig that scoring tool into the form. Slip. Slip. Line those up. It's about like that. Okay, now cutting with my knife. I'm going to make a little slit right here. Pretty even. And then before I start to blend it, I'm telling you, this wooden paddle deal is freaking sweet. Even a piece of scrap flat wood would work. And then I'm going to take my tool and work the clay downward because I don't want to disrupt my nice flat bottom. So I'm going to go down on that seam where I attached the bottom. And I'm going to come back and look at that a couple more times as I smooth and refine just to make sure. Just because it looks smooth on the outside and I can't see the seam doesn't mean that it's fully connected. Now I'll go over it with the sponge. My finger to compress, thumb. And then it looks like I need to go back inside again. So I'm going to do that with my brush first because I need to get the goop down at the bottom. And then what I do later is round these a bit better, maybe thin them out. But I'm going to go get my pinch pot and also check the chat. I'm seeing some comments. So voila. All in a day's work. Definitely starting to firm up in just those 5 minutes in direct sunlight. So you don't want to leave it out there for too long so it's bone dry. All right, let me check the chat. I'm seeing some questions.